Ashwood wasn't dead. Not quite, but it had been coughing up rust and sorrow for years. The steel mill shut down in 2006, the movie theater flickered its last reel in 2009, and even the post office now operated out of a shared space with the liquor store. The only thing that hadn't changed, not really, was Harlow's diner. Harlow's sat like a stubborn old memory on the corner of Main and Dusty Lane, all chipped bricks and weather-beaten signage, clinging to its past with the same desperation as the folks inside. The booths were torn, the linoleum floor was so worn it looked soft. But the coffee stayed hot, the regulars stayed loyal, and behind the counter, Ivana Voss wiped down the same laminated menus she'd touched every day for 18 years. She was 42 now, though most thought she looked older. Grief aged you different. It didn't show up in gray hairs or laugh lines. It burrowed deeper, in posture, in pauses, in the way your eyes scanned a room like they were always expecting someone. That someone was Kalen, her boy, vanished during the dinner rush when he was just 6 years old. One moment coloring by the pie case, the next, gone. No witnesses, no note. Just an empty sidewalk and a lifetime of aching questions. Ivana had left the coffee pot boiling that night. It boiled over. Cale, her younger brother, was supposed to be watching Kalen. He'd stepped out for a smoke. He never forgave himself, and neither did she. Not fully. Now Ivana lived in limbo, eyes always drifting to the door at the chime of the bell, heart always bracing. Most days were quiet. She liked it that way, until he walked in. It was a Tuesday. The rain had come down like it meant business, slicing sideways through the parking lot. The bell above the door jingled sharp, and in stepped a man in a dark trench coat, tailored clean, water streaking off the shoulders. He stood tall, lean, maybe mid-30s, with eyes like gray smoke and a scar that ran like a whisper across his jawline. He looked wrong for Ashwood, too polished, too sharp-edged, like someone who had escaped this town and never meant to come back. He took off his coat, shook it once, and folded it with the kind of precision you didn't see in a place where napkins doubled as paper towels. Ivana didn't look up at first, just another lost soul passing through. But when he sat at the counter, something in her paused, a tilt of the head, the way his fingers drummed the counter twice before stopping. A pattern. Her son used to do that. He ordered coffee. Black, said please. Smiled faintly. She poured without thinking, but her hands trembled just enough for the pot to spill a little over the rim. He didn't flinch, just took a napkin and dabbed the edge. Quiet, calm. Name's Torrin, he said after a long sip. Torrin Strath. She nodded slowly. Ivana. A beat passed. You ever been here before? She asked, her voice tight. Torrin blinked, brow furrowing like the question scratched something under his skin. Not that I remember, he said, but it feels familiar. And just like that, something inside Ivana cracked open. A scar beneath a scar, because she could have sworn. It wasn't just his voice, or the scar, or the way he stirred his coffee counterclockwise. It was everything, like a ghost that didn't know it was haunting. The storm outside deepened as the afternoon wore on, tapping at the diner's windows like a restless memory. Torrin sat alone at the counter, sipping his second cup of coffee, his eyes flicking occasionally toward the rain, as if he were waiting for something, or someone, he couldn't name. Ivana watched from behind the pie case. She wiped the same counter 3 times without realizing. Something about the man unsettled her in a way that didn't feel dangerous. It felt familiar. It made her chest ache, made the floor seem further away than it was. She glanced at Maris, the other waitress on shift, who gave her a raised brow and a tilt of the head. You good? Ivana just nodded, but her hands gripped the towel like she was wringing out more than water. Eventually, she found herself drawn back to the counter. You from around here? She asked, forcing calm into her voice. Torrin looked at her, eyes steady. No, he said, raised on the East Coast. I was adopted, came into the system when I was about 10. No memory before that. That word, adopted, hit her like a car horn in a quiet night. 10? She said carefully. He nodded. Yeah. Head injury, maybe. That's what the papers said. I showed up in a hospital in Pittsburgh. No ID, no answers. Just me, a few broken bones, and a name someone guessed I might have mumbled. Everything before that is a blank. Ivaina's throat dried. Pittsburgh. That wasn't far, not far at all from Ashwood. Torrens stirred his coffee again, counterclockwise, slowly. I don't know why I came here, he continued. Just a gut pull. Weird, right? Her fingers trembled on the counter. People don't just end up in Ashwood unless they're trying to disappear. Or remember something. Torren gave a tight smile. Maybe both. There was a silence then, thick and strange, until Torren broke it by pulling a thin envelope from his coat pocket. I bought this place, by the way, he said offhandedly. Well, the property, Harlow's and the 2 lots beside it. Planning to renovate, maybe turn it into something useful. Ivaina blinked. You bought Harlow's? He nodded. Didn't mean to make a scene. The papers were signed last week. I just wanted to see the place myself before decisions were made. And with that, he set the envelope down. You're in the photo, he said. Ivaina stared at him. He slid the photo across the counter. It was old, faded, bent at the corners. Inside, she saw herself, young, smiling, holding the hand of a 6-year-old boy outside the very diner they stood in now. Kaylin, her hands froze. Where did you get this? Torren looked as confused as she did. It was tucked into the back of the purchase file, like someone wanted me to find it. She stared at the boy in the photo, the same eyes, the same chin, and that scar on Torren's jaw. Kaylin had fallen off the porch at 5 and split his cheek on the railing. They said it would fade, but it hadn't. Ivaina looked up, her eyes glassy, her voice a whisper. You said you came here because of a feeling, right? Torren nodded. She swallowed. Then maybe... You're not here to buy this place. She placed her hand gently on the photo. Maybe you came home. Torren didn't respond at first. He just stared at the photo between them like it might move or explain itself. The image of a small boy, her son, clung to his hand now as tightly as it had to hers in that picture. But the silence between them was louder than the storm. I don't know what this means, he finally said. Ivaina's voice trembled. I do. Torren looked up. His face gave nothing away, but his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, searched her face like they were trying to remember. She wished she could give him the memories he never got to keep. I had a son, she said softly. His name was Kaylin. He disappeared from this diner when he was 6. I turned around to grab pie from the case, and when I turned back... Her voice cracked. He was gone. She saw his throat move, one hard swallow. I don't remember being taken, Torren said, almost apologizing. You wouldn't, Ivaina whispered. Not if they wanted to erase everything. He leaned back slowly, processing it all like someone trying to hold onto water with bare hands. Then, cautiously, he asked, Who would do that? A name burned at the back of her mind, one she hadn't said aloud in years. Finch. A name whispered around desperate corners by women trying to save their kids from worse monsters. A man who promised disappearances that looked like accidents. Legal, clean, vanishing acts. But she had never taken him up on it. Cale had. She picked up the photo, hand shaking. I need to show you something. Ivaina led him to the back room, past the fryer and the freezer. The room smelled of grease, onions, and ghosts. She pulled up a section of the floorboard near the storage rack, something she'd done only twice before, and lifted out a worn tin box. Inside were all the pieces of Kaylin that time hadn't taken. His baby tooth, a faded sketch of a rocket ship, a lock of his hair wrapped in tissue, and an old letter, creased, yellowed, written by Cale. Torren watched as she opened it. She read it aloud, her voice barely above the hum of the rain. Eve, if anything happens to me, please know I only did what I thought was right. Gideon's threats were getting worse. I didn't know what else to do. Finch said he could make Kaylin safe, said it would be clean. No questions. I never thought he'd vanish like that. I thought he'd end up somewhere better. Gideon, Kaylin's father, violent, obsessive, dangerous. Ivena's hand trembled. Kale gave him to Finch to protect him from Gideon, but Finch lied. He took him and erased him. Torin took a step back. That's what happened to me. Maybe not all of it, she said, eyes glassy. But it fits, doesn't it? His breath grew shallow. That's insane. Is it, she asked, or have you been trying to get back here your whole life without even knowing why? Torin didn't answer. He just stared at the letter, then back at the woman in front of him. And in that moment, he didn't see a stranger. He saw something else, something he'd been missing. Torin couldn't sleep that night. He returned to his hotel suite overlooking the edge of town, but the warmth of the fireplace didn't reach him. The rain tapped the windows like questions, and he had no answers. He sat at the desk, the photo beside him. The little boy looked so happy, so familiar. He reached for his phone and dialed a number, Vader, the only person in his life who could chase ghosts through code. Yeah, Vader answered groggily. Boss? I need you to dig, Torin said. Hard. Where? Ashwood, Pennsylvania. 19 years ago. Look for missing children. A boy named Kaylin Voss, 6 years old, disappeared from Harlow's diner. There was a pause. You think he's you? Vader asked bluntly. I don't know what to think, Torin replied, rubbing his temples. But if I was taken, there's a name. Finch. Kale Voss gave me to him. Find everything. You got it, Vader said, waking up quickly. Give me 24 hours. The next morning, Ivana waited at the diner early. She hadn't slept either. Every plate she carried, every refill she poured, was done through a fog of fear and trembling hope. Would he come back? Would he believe her? At 9:12 a.m. he did. Same calm walk, same quiet eyes. But now his steps felt different, heavier. They sat at a booth this time, tucked into the corner where the view of the parking lot framed everything in rain-washed gray. Neither spoke at first. Then Torin pulled out his phone. His name was Philip Finch, a.k.a. David Wren, posed as a legal intermediary for over 2 decades, ran underground adoptions, bribed doctors, erased pasts, confirmed to have had connections in Ashwood. Ivana's lips parted in horror. There's more, Torin said. Kale's name came up. He paid Finch through a cash drop at a truck stop off Route 90. No trace after that. She buried her face in her hands. He thought he was saving Kaylin, she whispered, but he handed him off to a monster. Torin stared at her, voice barely audible. I think I lived with that monster for a while, before I ended up in the system. He paused, then looked directly at her. You really think I'm him? Ivana didn't hesitate. I know you are. Her voice cracked, but her eyes didn't waver. There's a way to prove it, she added, pulling a small velvet pouch from her apron. Inside was a single baby tooth in a sealed bag. Kaylin lost this a week before he disappeared. It's been in my freezer since. Torin stared at it. He couldn't speak. We can test it, she whispered. He looked down at the pouch, then back up. If it's true, he said carefully, what then? Ivana reached across the table, her hand trembling. Then I get my son back. Torin looked at her, 1,000 unspoken feelings in his eyes, and for the first time in years, the word mother didn't feel like a question. The DNA results came faster than expected. Torin had pulled strings, expedited labs, private channels. When the envelope arrived by courier 3 days later, he didn't open it alone. They sat side by side in Ivana's tiny living room above the florist shop, the air filled with the scent of dried roses and forgotten time. Neither reached for the envelope right away. It sat between them like a loaded gun, daring one of them to break the silence. Torin finally picked it up. He opened it slowly, deliberately, and there, in plain language, 99.9987% probability of maternity match between Ivana Voss and subject A, Torin Strath. He let out a shaky breath. She covered her mouth, eyes brimming with tears she had locked away for almost 2 decades. "You're my son," she whispered. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just leaned back and stared at the ceiling like the weight of everything was finally crashing down on him. Every piece of himself that never fit anywhere. Now it made sense. He was Kalen. And Ashwood was the home he had been ripped from, but joy wasn't the only thing that followed the truth. That evening, a knock came at Avena's door. Cale, gray-haired, thinner than she remembered, but his eyes still held that storm of guilt that had never fully passed. "I saw the paper," he said. "I know who he is." Torrin stood behind Avena silently. Cale's voice trembled. "I didn't mean for him to disappear. I was trying to save him. From Gideon. You remember what that man was like. He wasn't going to stop. He said he'd take Kalen one day and you'd never see him again." "You thought giving him to Finch was the better option?" Avena asked, eyes burning. "I was desperate," Cale said. "I didn't know Finch was a trafficker. I didn't know he'd erase him." "But you never told me," she said bitterly. "You never gave me the choice." "I was scared," he admitted. "And I hated myself the minute it happened. I tried to get Kalen back. I really did, but Finch vanished." Torrin stepped forward. "So, you just buried it?" "For 18 years. Cale nodded slowly. "I tried to make it right in other ways. I tracked Finch, sent anonymous tips, even paid people to investigate, but nothing stuck." Torrin stared at him, jaw tight. "You know what I lost? You know what she lost?" "I do," Cale said, falling to his knees. "I'll go to the police. I'll confess everything." The room was dead silent. Avena looked away. "You were my brother, Cale." "I still am," he whispered, "but I'll pay for what I did. I already have, every day since." Torrin turned away from him, not out of hatred, but because he couldn't look at the man who stole his life. And for a moment, no one moved, no one breathed, because forgiveness doesn't come easy, not when it costs this much. Months passed. Cale turned himself in. His confession, combined with evidence Torrin's team uncovered, led to the arrest of Finch, now living under a new name in Nevada. The adoption ring was dismantled, but it didn't bring back the years. Avena and Torrin moved slowly, like people relearning how to walk in each other's presence. He was no longer Torrin Strath, the enigmatic billionaire tech mogul. Not fully, and he wasn't quite Kalen Voss either, not the boy who used to collect bottle caps and hum along to cartoon jingles. He was something between, but he was hers. They spent long afternoons just talking, about small things at first, favorite foods, memories she thought he might have buried, the treehouse Cale built, the scar under his knee from falling off the bike at age 5. Sometimes he remembered in flashes, a smell, a sound, a feeling that felt like home. But the past wasn't the only thing on their minds. One morning, standing outside the diner, Torrin turned to Avena. "I want to do something with this place, not just renovate it. I want it to mean something." She looked up at him, curious. "I want to call it Kalen's Place," he said. "Not a diner, not exactly. A place where kids can come to be safe, learn, heal. There'll be an observatory upstairs, a telescope tower. I used to dream of stars when I couldn't sleep. I think Kalen did too." Avena's eyes welled up again, but she nodded. They got to work. The grand opening took place on a bright spring afternoon, the sky scrubbed clean by wind. Children ran through the new halls, laughter echoing off warm walls. Upstairs, the observatory dome opened wide to reveal a silver telescope pointed toward a sky still glowing with sunlight. In the center of the garden outside stood a sculpture, a little boy reaching for the stars, a small red heart on his chest. At the base, a plaque read, "For every child who was lost, and every parent who never stopped looking." Maris, the other waitress, came quietly to the event. She hadn't said much during the investigation, but guilt wore on her. She'd confessed to being paid by Finch to distract Avena the night Kalen disappeared, just long enough to pull him outside. She hadn't known the full plan, but she hadn't asked questions either. She stepped forward at the opening with a donation slip in hand, an endowment in Kaylin's name, scholarships for children in foster care. It didn't undo the past, but it was something. That night, after the last guest left, Torrin stood with Ivana under the stars. "You okay?" he asked. She took his hand, hers weathered, his calloused in a different way. "I am now," she whispered. He looked at her, eyes reflecting the stars, and for the first time since his memory began, Torrin felt whole. He had been a billionaire searching for legacy. Now he had found something far rarer, a home, a mother, and the boy he used to be.